All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive. Today, today we're going to kind of rewind the clock a bit back to 1914 to
Okay.
the start of World War One,
Yeah.
and we really want to uncover the true cost, the human cost of this global conflict.
Yeah.
And we're going to be using this History.com article. It's called "How Many People Died in World War One." And here's the thing: we're not just focusing on the numbers.
Right.
We really want to understand why the death toll was so high,
Yeah.
and also what does it mean for us, like over a century later. Now, imagine Europe in 1914, right? Tensions are high, things are simmering,
Yeah.
but no one's expecting the just massive scale of the devastation to come.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. The world was really on the brink of a war, unlike any it had seen before. And I think this article from history.com does a good job of highlighting this, like
Yeah.
how much historians still grapple with the true death toll.
That's what I find hard to believe, that even now, like, we don't have a precise figure.
Right. What makes it so difficult to actually like pin down a number?
Well, the sheer magnitude, the huge scale of the war, that's a major factor, of course.
Oh, of course.
But there are also other complexities, like, the 1918 flu pandemic.
Right.
It makes it really hard to separate, deaths that were directly caused by combat versus those from, disease.
Mm-hmm.
But the Robert Schuman European Center,
Okay.
they've done, really extensive work on this.
Yeah.
They estimate around 9.7 million military deaths.
Wow.
And 6.8 million civilian deaths.
So like roughly 16.5 million lives lost.
Yeah.
Oh, that number's just staggering. And here's something else that I found really surprising. The article mentions that the Allied forces, like, they actually suffered more military deaths than the Central Powers.
Mm.
Like, wouldn't you think that the victors would typically have a lower death count? Like, what factors could have led to this? Well, yeah, I mean, it is a bit counterintuitive, but I think a lot of it has to do with just the brutal nature of the fighting and the technological advancements that really defined World War I.
Yeah.
This war, it marked the first large-scale introduction of these new technologies, right? Trench warfare, submarines, airplanes, poison gas, flamethrowers, machine guns.
Right.
The tactics of the time hadn't caught up with this devastating firepower.
Yeah, and the article really drives that point home, right? Like outdated tactics versus this weaponry that's just devastating. They quote this French historian Antoine Prost.
Okay.
And he's describing scenes of soldiers, they're charging into machine guns, essentially just walking into massacres. Like, it just paints such a grim picture.
Oh, absolutely. It was a horrifying reality for those soldiers, on the ground. I mean, just imagine, right? The psychological impact of facing such overwhelming force. And even a young Charles de Gaulle, who, later on became a key figure in French history, even he wrote that bravery couldn't prevail against firepower.
Wow.
And I think that really stuck with him,
Yeah.
His experience in the trenches of World War I really deeply impacted his later military thinking.
Right.
He recognized that the world needed to move away from these outdated tactics, that it needed to embrace the strategic use of technology.
Yeah, and it's interesting how this one experience shaped his whole approach.
Exactly.
And, it feels so relevant even today. Like, the world's still grappling with how technology changes the nature of conflict. But even with all those advancements, wasn't artillery still responsible for the most deaths in World War I?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, according to Prost, 60% of French soldier injuries were caused by artillery shells.
60%.
Yeah. But, the impact of technology goes way beyond just sheer destructive power. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it also played a crucial role in creating these stalemate conditions that really defined the war.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Miles and miles of trenches stretching across Europe.
Yeah.
These new technologies, particularly machine guns and artillery, they made it almost impossible for either side to advance.
Right.
And that led to these protracted, these bloody battles that just dragged on and on.
And of course, the Battle of Somme comes to mind. Like, over 20,000 British soldiers killed on the very first day of fighting. Just the sheer scale of loss on one single day it's almost impossible to really grasp.
Yeah, the Somme, it became a tragic symbol of the horrors of trench warfare. And what's really striking is that even after experiencing such devastating losses. Like you said, on that first day, the battle raged on for months.
Oh, wow.
It just underscores how this combination of new technology and outdated tactics, it just led to this horrific stalemate.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to even imagine the just brutality of the fighting. But as you mentioned, the Somme, it was just one of many battles that contributed to the immense death toll of World War I. The article also highlights those just appalling conditions
Right.
in the trenches.
Yeah.
Imagine like being a soldier,
Yeah.
not only facing like constant enemy fire,
Right.
but also just the threat of disease.
Absolutely. I mean, disease was rampant in the trenches, and it wasn't just from, battle wounds.
Right.
The unsanitary conditions, they played a huge role. Trench foot, dysentery, typhoid. I mean, these were all constant threats. Yeah. And then, of course, you had the 1918 influenza pandemic, which swept through the battlefields and just added another layer of tragedy.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to think about these soldiers, already weakened by just the harsh conditions of war,
right,
and then being struck down by this deadly flu. And the timing of it, right?
Yeah.
Like coinciding with the war's final years.
Yeah.
It really amplified the devastation, didn't it?
Without a doubt. The flu pandemic, it had a devastating impact on both sides of the conflict. And it's a reminder that in war, death can come from many sources, not just the battlefield itself. But speaking of the battlefield, there's one detail in this article that I find particularly poignant.
Okay.
Even after the armistice was signed, on November 11th, 1918, fighting continued for another 6 hours.
Well, that's right. The article mentions that, like, that delay, it was intended to allow time for news of the armistice to reach the front lines.
Right.
But tragically, it resulted in almost 3,000 more lives lost.
Yeah.
It's those soldiers dying just hours, even minutes before peace was declared. It's hard to even fathom.
It really highlights the human cost of war, the senselessness of it all.
Yeah.
And even for those who survived, the war's impact didn't just end with the armistice. The physical and psychological scars, they often lingered for years, even decades.
The article, it touches on the long-term health consequences.
Right.
For veterans, particularly those exposed to mustard gas.
Right.
Even if they didn't succumb to immediate injuries, they faced a higher risk of cancers and other health problems later.
Yeah, it's a crucial aspect of understanding the true cost of war. We often focus on the immediate casualties, but the long-term suffering of survivors,
right,
it's equally important. For instance, there was a 2014 study of New Zealand World War I veterans.
Okay.
And it found that they had a shorter life expectancy compared to non-combatants. And they also had higher rates of suicide.
Wow, those statistics they're sobering.
Yeah.
And it's clear that the trauma of war, it can have such a profound, like a lasting impact on individuals and entire generations. It makes you think about how we as a society can better support veterans,
right,
and acknowledge the invisible wounds that they carry.
That's a crucial question. And I think one of the most important takeaways from this whole deep dive into World War I is that the cost of war, it extends far beyond the battlefield.
Right.
It ripples through time. It affects individuals, families, societies for generations to come.
So as we reflect on the staggering death toll and the enduring legacy of World War I, like, what lessons can we learn? What does it teach us about the nature of war and its consequences?
Well, I think, World War I, it really stands as a stark warning about the dangers of unchecked nationalism.
Okay.
The rapid advancement of military technology and the failure to adapt to new realities.
It makes you think about how we approach conflict today. Like, do we really grasp the potential cost of war, and not just in terms of like immediate casualties, but also those long-term effects on individuals, on societies, on the world as a whole. This raises a really important question for our listener as we continue to grapple with conflict and violence in the 21st century. How can we apply the lessons of World War I to build a more peaceful and just world?
It's something we all have to think about. It's vital.
Yeah, it's a question that I think we all need to wrestle with. And as we've seen, World War I, it wasn't just about battles and treaties and all that.
Right.
It really reshaped the world, right? It left these scars that we're still feeling even today.
Yeah.
And I think it's so easy to kind of get lost in the numbers, the dates, the military strategies.
Yeah.
But what really stood out to me in this whole deep dive were those individual stories,
Right.
those glimpses into the human cost of war.
Yeah, the stories are so crucial.
Yeah.
They really remind us that behind all the statistics, there are real people, each with their own, hopes and dreams and fears, and their experiences, both on the battlefield and in the aftermath. They offer these invaluable lessons about the true impact of conflict.
Exactly. And it's not just about, remembering the past. It's about understanding how it shapes, our present and our future.
Right.
And I'm curious, what stood out to you the most in our, exploration of World War I's death toll?
Hmm.
Was it the sheer scale of the loss,
Hmm.
or the role of technology,
Hmm.
the long-term consequences for survivors?
Well, I mean, those are all critical aspects, of course, but for me, it always comes back to that human element,
Hmm.
the stories of resilience, the acts of courage, the enduring trauma. Those are the things that really stay with me. They
Yeah.
they remind us that the impact of war, it goes so far beyond the battlefield,
Right.
and it continues to shape lives and societies for generations to come.
It's a powerful reminder for sure. And it kind of leads us to a final thought-provoking question for you, our listener. Given what we've learned, how do you think World War I shaped the world that we live in today?
Well, yeah.
From the geopolitical landscape to the way we think about technology, conflict, the echoes of that war, they're still reverberating.
Yeah. We really encourage you to keep exploring this topic.
Yeah.
Delve into those personal stories, examine the technological advancements,
Right.
consider the political and social upheavals that defined that era.
Yeah.
By understanding the past, we can better navigate the present and shape a future where the horrors of World War I are never repeated.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into history. We hope it sparked your curiosity to learn even more, to keep questioning, and to engage in those thoughtful conversations about the world around us.
Absolutely.